My name is Jeff Winter. I'm actually one of the advisors for IoT World, and I'm excited to be here today. So I'm going to be the moderator of today's session, Benefits of Connecting the Plant Floor to the Cloud. And we have an exciting group of leaders here today who all have led successful initiatives dedicated to this very topic. So I'm going to start by introducing our experts. We have Kobus van Heerden, and Kobus is a senior product manager for analytics and machine learning software at GE Digital. He has 20 years of experience in developing and implementing industrial analytics and machine learning software globally. He specializes in helping industrial organizations realize transformational productivity gains through applying analytics and machine learning software in the manufacturing industry. Next, we have Brian Marsh. Brian is the Senior Director of Digital Manufacturing for Nestle USA. And with over 25 years of experience in food manufacturing, he specializes in implementing TPM, Total Productive Maintenance, using digital technologies to enhance the efficiency, the productivity, and even the morale of manufacturing facilities and their workforce. Next, we have Ariel Shasko, and Ariel is a smart factory deployment manager at Kennametal. And after completing Kennametal's Emerge Rotational Leadership Program, she became a project manager and transitioned into her current role where she's tasked with implementing Kennametal's Industry 4.0 strategy, enabling manufacturing to execute better, faster, and smarter. And lastly, we have Matt Townsend, and Matt is the Vice President of Digital Transformation at Medtronic. And Medtronic is a global manufacturer of instruments and appliances that alleviate pain, restore health, and extend life. So in getting together and kind of prep for this session, we actually broke out our topics into three main ones that we're going to go over today. So we're going to be talking about benefits of a connected factory. We're going to be talking about applications and use cases, and where and how to start. And then we're gonna have maybe about 10 to 15 minutes at the end for your questions. So please put them in the chat. And then after those three topics, we're gonna get to your questions. Now, before getting into the topics, I wanna set the stage by asking the audience a poll question. And just so you know, throughout the session, we're actually gonna have 3 poll questions as we transition into each new topic. So the first question is, what is the main driver for a connected factory? Is it increased production? Is it to reduce costs? Is it improved quality, improved agility, or even better visibility? I guess we can put, I see in there now, choice 5 can be other as part of it. So we'll see what you kind of come up with, and we'll kind of have you answer as we go through. So while you're thinking about the answers, we'll start with our first topic, the benefits of a connected factory. And so as we navigate the fourth industrial revolution, or Industry 4.0, the integration of cloud computing and IoT has emerged as critical components for building a connected and smart factory. And you hear a lot of claims out there about the promises of these technologies, such as the very things that I mentioned in this poll: increased production, reduced cost, improved quality, agility, better visibility, and so on. But I want to hear what our panelists have to say about what they've experienced firsthand. And I'll be curious to see how closely some of their answers align with the results that we have kind of coming in from the polls. So Brian, let's start with you. You work for one of the largest food companies in the world with hundreds of factories around the globe. What are some of the benefits that you've seen from connecting your factories to the cloud?
Yeah, for us, and by the way, thanks, Jeff, for having me today. But some of the bigger benefits we have is really the analysis tools that you can get in the cloud today. So, when you're trying to do things like predictive maintenance, or let's say you're trying to run a vision system to do analysis of like quality parameters on your line, we're finding that many of the analysis tools that you can get from the cloud are much better than what you can get in a standalone environment. So that's one of them. We're also doing a lot of stuff with remote monitoring. We're finding that a lot of the security features are a lot better off if you run them through a cloud service. And then lastly, we look at tools such as machine learning, advanced technology stuff to really do like correlation studies and that kind of stuff in the cloud to really get after golden batch, find that perfect product that we can sell to our customer.
I like it. I like it.
All right.
All right, Ariel, we'll switch to you. how do you see a connected factory as part of a larger Industry 4.0 initiative? And what do you see as the critical elements for creating value as a part of this?
Sure, Jeff. I'm really excited and looking forward to answering some of these questions, but I see a connected factory as an instrument that really enables that harmonious symphony that is Industry 4.0. So we all know that capturing and storing and analyzing real-time data and historical data is critical, but how do we achieve that? I think it starts ideally with your IT infrastructure, but really begins where you connect your machines, devices, and systems, seamlessly communicating and exchanging that data within your manufacturing environment. This is that networked ecosystem that enables operational efficiency because the data really only works if we do. Your people, your processes, and your technologies are the critical elements to create value. Think of it this way. What use is real-time data if your people don't know how to effectively utilize real-time data? What good is digital dashboarding and visualization if you don't have a process like leader standard work for people to be able to effectively and efficiently respond? What benefit are you going to get from agile manufacturing if you don't have the right technology to optimize your schedules, reducing your time to market? People, process, technology, those three things together create value. What happens when one of those critical elements is missing? So if you're missing processes, but you have technology and your people kind of covered, you're going to experience poor employee engagement and lack the right level of adoption. If you're missing technology, you have the process and the people kind of covered, you're going to experience short-term success, but you're risking your long-term viability. And if you're missing people as part of this equation, you haven't learned a dang thing about Industry 4.0 because people should be truly at the heart of why you are doing what you're doing. Just ask some of the lighthouse factories, better yet, Google it because you probably can't reach them. Impact at scale can really only be achieved when the right people with the right expertise and right tools can do their job effectively. The common thread that's among these lighthouse factories, they put people at the center of their transformation, which allows them to unlock the full potential of Industry 4.0.
Well, I like that you say that. And those that know me very well know the slogan I always like to repeat, which is for successful digital transformation, people are the focus, technology is the tool, and more value is the outcome. And you just exemplified
I'm
that.
riding your coattails a little bit on that one.
So we'll switch to Matt. You have actually been on both sides, solution provider and manufacturer. And I'm curious if your appreciation of the shop floor actually changed either because of either the roles that you had and what that means to what you're doing for a connected factory.
Yeah, no, definitely, Jeff, and thanks for being here. I don't know if I want to go after Arnold. That was probably one of the best 2-minute speeches I've ever heard about Industry 4.0. She blows you out of the water. So, but to go back to your question, yeah, so I've been lucky enough to have been on both sides, and I spent the vast majority of my career in automotive. And in automotive, we're very arrogant towards we're the best, right? We know how to do everything. We started connected equipment, years and years and years ago, started to put ourselves ahead of the curve. Then I left and was a solution provider, just like we talked about, and it allowed me to benchmark a bunch of different industries around anything from pharmaceutical all the way to power and everything vast in between. And so it opened my eyes with, I can, steal a little bit of this and I can borrow that and I can look at this. And then the benchmarking of how, the shop floor was built. And you're 100% right. People are everything. And we've done, when we started our Industry 4.0 journey in the auto world way back when, we put technology first and people second, and it kind of failed. We learned that lesson the hard way. And so moving from there to solution provider, now where I'm at today at Medtronic, we've taken all those lessons learned. We've taken a little bit of this and a little bit of that from a bunch of different, types of industry. And I think we've built, what we consider as one of the benchmark, for sure, enterprise architect systems for our manufacturing.
Well, I look forward to diving into that a little bit deeper in our next sections when we start to actually go over the use cases and can hear about it. But sticking to the value for now and the benefits, Cobus, what outcomes are you seeing from companies who invest in a connected factory?
Jeff, it's wonderful to be with you all today and spend this hour with our audience. I'll share 3 outcomes from my experience. Firstly, in my experience, connecting manufacturing enterprises and factories with cloud technology really enable centralized remote operations, especially for global or distributed enterprises with, let's say, whether it's a few number of large manufacturing plants or a large fleet of smaller assets or global distributed fleets. It really enables that centralized remote operations, enabling enterprises, for example, to centralize maybe centers of excellence of certain subject matter experts, to remotely manage or operate or optimize or service maybe multiple plants or multiple facilities. And in that way, really run leaner teams and infrastructure on site, because they can, obviously we know they can move some IT infrastructure to the cloud, but also they can centralize teams. So central remote operations, that brings cost savings, leaner operations, etc. The second outcome I'll share is really the ability that connecting factories to the plant enable enterprises to do cross-plant, whether it's cross-plant or enterprise or cross-role or function operations optimization and collaboration, and enabling a whole new breed, like Brian mentioned, of cloud-based analytics, collaboration, innovation, and productivity tools, that can help them really optimize value across geographic or global supply chains, can add, really result in new levels of agility in our, global market and supply chain environments, just add resilience and really just run a more optimal, efficient operation. Helping also to remove data silos, across remote facilities. And the last and third outcome I'll share is that maybe for greenfield, smaller plants, it can enable faster startup and again, leaner operations, meaning I can get going really quickly, again, because I can utilize a lot of cloud tools. I can really minimize my on-premise, maintain only critical IT infrastructure on-prem. So generally enabling central remote operations, enabling cross-plant collaboration and productivity, a whole new suite of productivity tools, and just really enabling faster startups for maybe smaller plants, which otherwise would have really have to invest in IT departments, a lot more IT infrastructure on site.
I like the 3 outcomes. It reminds me of another slogan that I like to say related to digital transformation and smart manufacturing a lot, which is think big, act small, and start fast. And so that kind of applies to all those there. So let's switch over to our second poll question before we dive into our next topic. And the last one was about the drivers of value. Now let's talk about the readiness, or at least the perceived readiness. So do you think your current IT infrastructure is actually ready for a transition to the cloud for plant floor operations? Yes, completely ready, somewhat ready, neutral, not quite ready, or not ready at all? This is just one I'm very personally curious about, so I can't wait to see what the answers come in. So as you guys are answering that, our second topic is going to be more geared around the applications and use cases. So cloud-based technology is no longer a disruptor in manufacturing. It's actually become the future of modern manufacturing. And according to IoT Analytics, the overall cloud market is projected to hit almost $600 million by 2026 with a growth rate of like 33% each year. And manufacturing at roughly 18% of the market is actually growing faster than that rate, which means it's growing faster than a lot of the other industries that are out there. So if people are investing, where should they put their money? Where are you seeing the most success? how and where are machines and systems being connected to the cloud to enhance operational efficiency, improve decision-making, enable real-time monitoring and other cool functionality like some of the stuff that you guys just mentioned. So we'll kind of flip a little bit the order here. Cobus, we'll start with you. What have you seen be the most successful use case of a connected factory? And in terms of like ROI, value, speed of implementation, it doesn't matter. However you grade success, where have you seen the most successful use case?
Jeff, as a industrial software provider to manufacturing industries for many, many years, I will speak to essentially the usefulness of moving, if the audience can think of the typical automation hierarchy and levels from basically level 1, 2, 3, your SCADAs, your MES, your ERP. I will speak to that, and I'll mention three really useful, very commonly used, let's say, operational technologies that can be considered, that can really add a lot of value if you consider how you would utilize some of that, maybe in the cloud or partially in the cloud or migrate it to the cloud. So firstly, let's talk about SCADA. Really, if I think there's opportunities for manufacturing enterprises to consider how they can move some elements of their SCADA systems to the cloud, enabling exactly what I mentioned before, for example, for remote central supervisory control and data acquisition, remote monitoring, enabling remote central operation control towers. Again, especially if you have a highly geographically distributed fleet of assets or sites. Take the unfortunate times we went through with COVID, where everybody had lockdowns. Hopefully, we never have to go through that again. But it enabled customers to run their operations, to continue to run work from anywhere, access applications from anywhere. So I think cloud SCADA is something that has good applicability. The critical thing, obviously, is to keep your critical controls, so your PLCs, your critical safety controls that keep the sites and the assets running, they always remain on-prem. But monitoring software, you can potentially, if you have the right connectivity, to internet and cloud, consider to some of those can move up. Then secondly, manufacturing execution systems. Again, cloud MES, thinking of moving or migrating or considering putting some elements of your MES system in the cloud really enables a smaller footprint on-prem. Also helps you towards the path of maybe zero downtime upgrades, for those manufacturing systems, which are often, rolled out across a large enterprise, many plants. It takes a lot of effort to maybe upgrade and maintain. And then also just reduces your IT costs, and again, allowing central access from anywhere for remote operations. And thirdly, I will highlight maybe historians, process historians with, all your sensor data. It's a great use case to essentially centralize those historical data or some of that using cloud historian technology. And, what that really does is it opens up, your organization to benefit from a whole new world of cloud productivity, analytics, and analysis tools on top of that data. So cloud SCADA, there's opportunities. Cloud MES and cloud historians, there may be opportunities to not necessarily move all of that, but migrate some of those capabilities remotely or to the cloud or connected to the cloud for the reasons I mentioned.
And that makes sense. And, especially if you're thinking of it in like the ISA 95 hierarchy, absolutely. Especially as you go up, more functions can make sense to be utilizing the cloud. So Matt, what have you seen as kind of the sweet spot as the best application to get people excited about the possibilities of a connected factory and the value of Industry 4.0? And do you have any use cases that would exemplify this?
Yeah, I've got lots actually. So on a different kind of note, more of a manufacturing field than Cobus was talking about, is connecting equipment's hard. And for those who tell you it's not hard and it's easy, they've never done it. It is extremely difficult. And what I mean by that is we've had equipment that is identical build, identical manufacturer side by side, and yet they have different connection methods because some of the electronics inside were a little bit different. Maybe the PLC is a little bit modified differently. It's extremely difficult. So one thing you missed in your previous 2 seconds about there, Jeff, was scale. And so when we build our manufacturing enterprise, we built it so that we could scale. And when we move product factory to factory, and I know not everybody has multiple sites, but in my world, we live in a site where, we're vertically integrated, right? We build in one area, ship to another, build again, ship to another, build again. And so the most important part for us in the connected world is the ability to share data that we built on that particular unit. When it moves to another plant, we can pull that down out of the cloud, pull that data in, run some machine learning, some other algorithms in the background that says, okay, here is now, to use your word, sweet spot. Here's the sweet spot of our next build, without having to do some math or do some other checks or do some things that we used to do in the old days, where we would take that, reinvestigate, rebuild it, almost reanalyze it, inspect it like we had already done in order to get those characteristics to make a good build. So the most important thing for us is taking that data, putting it in the cloud, moving it to another plant, bring it back down, import it, use a little bit of math, figure it out, and then continue on with the manufacturing process, eliminating scrap, downtime, all of those things that we all struggle with so much.
As a follow-up to that, do you generally see people getting excited about that application, besides yourself, who obviously would be getting excited?
Yeah, it's good and it's bad. Let me rephrase that. So some people are very scared because they don't really understand how technology might be able to go that way. But yeah, once people get used to it, and again, it's a culture thing. I'm used to be doing something a certain way if I've been an operator for X number of years, and now I'm going to tell you it's a little bit different. We're going to have some machine learning or some work done in the cloud. Then it becomes a little exciting.
I'd like to think so. I just want to hear it from others that are part of the change. Ariel, we'll switch to you. Where within the manufacturing process do you see as like the lowest risk yet biggest bang for the buck opportunities?
Yeah, Jeff, and this is a great question. I do want to preface this by saying there's some asterisks in front of what I'm about to say, because there's no one size fits all for our digital transformations across the board. Believe me, I would have found it by now if there was. So here are 3 extremely low risk, big bang for your buck opportunities. First one being asset utilization. If you're just taking the first step in your journey, start small with your pilot. And I'm going to make this very practical. So I hope some of you will take some of this back, because I think the examples that I brought here today you can actually take these back to your company and actually go and do this. Start with a small project, clear ROI, demonstrate that quick win very quickly, and so that you can build momentum on top of it. Once you've perfected that pilot, so to speak, and you've documented it very well, you can scale that solution quickly. Wash, rinse, repeat. Matt, I agree with you. There are some nuances machine to machine, but I do think that if you know your machines well enough and what state they're in, you can, through documentation, great documentation, you can scale those solutions very quickly. A great example of a pilot could be your asset utilization. You want to increase asset utilization. Connect a few of those machines in a small, problematic, bottleneck type department. And from the connected machine data, work with your operational excellence team or some other type of improvement team that you have in your organization to monitor your downtime, your idle time, your speeds and feeds, and have a focused effort on increasing machine utilization. Get really good at the basics like that. Second one being automate manual data. There are repetitive, error-prone type of tasks that can be automated if you have the right IT architecture in place. Perfect example, automating manual data for quality control. Let's just say that you have a process where you're monitoring temperature on the machine and some critical to quality KPI within that material. The information is currently, in current state today, being written down by the operator on a piece of paper, passed to the supervisor. The supervisor then inputs that into some access database. It's not being utilized. That data in that access database is not being utilized. And that paper goes back into the filing cabinet and it's collecting dust. Not ideal. But let's just say you also have the right technology. This data could just be inputted directly, and even more ideally than that, automatically drop into the right place for this digital storage. And now you have easy access historical analysis. Now let's just say you can now see those adjustments that were made in the past. And maybe longer term, you pull a data science team in, they can create a model or an algorithm tying that IoT data with that quality data. And that allows you to maybe predict your problems before they occur. You can more effectively control your quality for that process. And projects like this one that I'm sharing, they can grow tentacles of opportunity very quickly. So that's where it becomes difficult to hone everybody back in and stay focused on your strategy. The last tip, and this is completely free, you can do this with no investment at all. Build a great strategy that is communicated well and often. Effective communication is crucial to the success of your transformation journey. Your strategy should guide your teams towards making the right decisions without micromanaging. 2 tools that I'm going to provide to you all for effective communication. First one being cross-functional collaboration, where you have multiple people from different teams in your meetings that are helping to foster this culture of responsibility and interdependency problem solving. The lens and perspective of a subject matter expert to another subject matter expert can foster innovative ideas and new concepts. Creating a secondary type of communication aspect would be creating a knowledge center or environment where maybe you have internal blogs on Yammer, or you have forums, wiki forums on your Teams channels, or maybe you have a SharePoint site where all of your best practices are being shared. Creating that culture that promotes innovation is going to help take you and your organization to the next level.
Well, I appreciate the very practical guidance that you can give to another manufacturer. That's very helpful. And we definitely think alike on the need to communicate a strategy, especially if you can do it in one sentence so everyone can repeat it and everyone is singing the same song.
I'm working on it.
Brian, let's go to you. If you have any great examples, would love to hear them. But at the same time, I also want to go beyond the use cases of today and maybe what some of the use cases are tomorrow based off of the next big technology in digital manufacturing. And where do you think it'll be used?
Well, that's a pretty easy one for me, Jeff. This is just my opinion, of course, but I am just stoked about all the new artificial intelligence things going on, specifically generative AI. ChatGPT, OpenAI, whatever your flavor is, I think it's going to be a game changer in the workforce, especially in manufacturing. So, it's pretty new to probably most of us, but I've been able to see some just great things in the small stuff that we've started from a pilot perspective. Think about all the large user manuals that you have for your equipment, right? That's very difficult to get people to read or use, and how you can, basically scan those ginormous documents into a system and then simply ask it a basic question and put that at an operator's fingertips. How much better will that be from a training environment in the future? I can't wait to see that. I mean, I think about use cases all day long on this, and I wish I had more time in the day to go experiment with this technology personally, because I'm really pumped up about it. But being able to put vision systems up in an area to monitor for like abnormal activity, whether it be a person doing something or a piece of machine, and being able to avoid like a safety incident, right? How cool would that be if we could have a computer system that's monitoring for abnormal activities that happen in all manufacturing environments, and how, if we could stop, one event from happening where somebody gets hurt, wouldn't that be cool? I just think this is going to be really cool. We struggle a lot in at least my industry with just basic problem solving, being able to ask questions on the fly without, pulling in a secondary person or another resource to a tool and being able to get an answer quickly. I really think, artificial intelligence, specifically generative AI, are going to really be a game changer. And I just can't wait to see what's coming. It's here. So I can't really say it's maybe the next big one. I just don't know that we all know how to leverage it to the fullest yet in the manufacturing arena.
You mentioned it's called Chat GPT. I've never heard of it.
Never heard of it. The guy who introduced it to me, so he's never heard of it. Oh boy, Jeff.
Yes, and that's a perfect example of, even though it wasn't directly stated, that is really can't be done unless you're leveraging your connected data, with the cloud. I mean, that's just an epitome of being connected and taking advantage of that data. So I think the world is trying to figure that out simultaneously. Glad,
but I think it's really going to be just not even just the manufacturing space. I mean, in general workplace environment, the number of use cases I'm seeing generated as you introduce it to new people. Can it do this? Can it do that? It's exponential, at least in my office space. So I can't keep up with it. We need more people that know more about it, know how to implement it, how to leverage it. And I think it's going to be the next big technology to your question, Joe.
Well, I think most people would agree with you. So yes, I agree. All right, as we kind of keep going on, we're starting to see some questions come in. Keep in mind, we're going to get to these at the end. We're going to have about 15 minutes. You can either ask a direct person, which we're seeing, or just a general question, but reminder to put your questions in. But let's switch over to our last poll question before we dive into our last topic. So the last two are more to high level. Now I want to talk about more your current capabilities as a connected factory on a very popular subject, OEE. So we could have a whole session just on this topic, but I just want to see where people are at for this particular question. So what level of real-time OEE visibility do you currently have? We don't calculate it. Machine level, production level or line level, facility or site level, or enterprise level. I'm just going to be curious where people come in for this one. So now we're going to switch to our third topic as these are coming in. Hopefully we'll be able to show them all the results at the end together too. So we went over the why, and then we went over the what and the where. Now let's go over the how. How do companies get started on their connected factory journey? And Matt, we'll start with you. Connecting the factory floor to the cloud is more than just an operations or OT project. It requires IT and is often part of a much larger digital transformation initiative. So how do you start something like this? And what can IT and OT each do independently to help prepare for it?
So we kind of touched on in the last segment a little bit when Ariel was talking about, building a project and moving forward and other things. And she used the word strategy. Strategy is key to starting. So what does your North Star look like? And how do you go from zero to North Star and build a strategy that starts with a mission statement? Pretty simple. What do you expect to get out of this, right? So as you move forward from building that to a proof of concept, whether you call it proof of concept or proof of value, generate what that ROI is on your small win, and then how do you scale that across to the rest of the universe becomes extremely key. So our key thing is our digital maturity assessment. And so we look at a plant, we look at what that looks like, how is it feel, how is it good with IT, how is it good with OT, and then the part that's missing in the question is the OpEx or the girls that physically do the work that the outcome of the digital journey gives you. Data is data. Whether you use the data to do something with it is the key. And so the third leg of that stool now becomes the OpEx group that takes the data and physically, changes the bottom line of your company, which is what we're all here for, right? We're all here to make it a better environment for the workforce, as well as generate, more profitability for the company. So start with a mission, build your strategy, and basically put your North Star in your route from where you want to go to where you want to be. I think is probably one of the key things to start with.
Always easier said than done, but yes, I would agree with that.
For sure.
So Ariel, what advice would you give to others on taking initial steps into their smart manufacturing transformation?
Sure. The first one is a big one, and it's a tough one. Slow down to speed up. What does that even mean? First and foremost, you're going to need a change maker, a pusher, somebody on your team who's going to be able to convince your top leaders at your organization to take the time to plan, prepare, and lay a solid foundation before accelerating into digital transformation. Emphasize the importance of aligning your decisions to your strategy when it means slowing down. Your leaders are going to be skeptical. This is a mindset shift. But if you take the perspective of the quantum worldview, where everything is connected, we accept that the challenges may be complex, and we recognize that in order to get deeper dialogue and understanding, you have to slow down to speed up. Second one, this may come across as contradictory at a high level, but there's a big difference between slowing down to speed up and analysis paralysis. The biggest assassination of progress in Industry 4.0 is analysis paralysis. When you're taking more time to manage your risks than you are to make decisions, and it feels like your wheels are spinning round and round, a couple of things could be happening. Maybe your strategy isn't clear enough for people to make the right decisions, and you're overthinking, you're over-engineering. You have enough directionally accurate information to take the first step in executing. Where does the most learning happen? Is it reading? Is it watching? Is it listening? It's a little bit of all of those things, but mostly learning happens when you're doing. And then the last thing is, this kind of takes me to the last piece of advice, which is don't be afraid to manage projects differently. Try utilizing agile project management. You may not have a Scrum Master at your organization, but you can still be agile without a Scrum Master. Sorry for all of those diehard agile project managers out there, but I've experienced it myself. You don't need it to work agilely. If most of your learning is completed by doing, try just taking that first step. The first step is always the most difficult. It's a change. People inherently do not like change or will resist it. But if you can get your team very comfortable with being uncomfortable, you can do a lot more.
It's interesting you mentioned the analysis paralysis, because normally I love to know my stats right off the top of my head, and I didn't prepare for this one, but there was a 2023 stat that specifically said analysis paralysis is increasing in these initiatives over previous years. So it's not that it's going down, it's going up. So addressing it is becoming more and more important. So great answer.
It can be exhausting too.
I believe it.
There.
I'm going to have to look
I've
up what
been
that
there.
stat is, and I will share it where I got it from. Brian, so when you have lots of facilities all over, how do you develop a connected and smart factory strategy that utilize them all on a common mission with some sort of standardization? And how do you decide what parts you should centralize and what parts you should decentralize?
Great question, Jeff. Maybe I'll start off with just a little bit up front on just the whole strategy concept that I think is a really important point. You know, this topic that we're talking about today changes probably daily, right? In terms of new products becoming available, ways to implement it, different thought processes around it. So I think the first thing I would say before I even get into your question is when you're doing a strategy, yeah, you need to have one. It's really important to have that and have alignment around that, but don't be so rigid when you have one that you're not willing to change it, because things change. You learn different things, new products come out, your environment changes, maybe even your business model changes. So I wouldn't go into it with a hard, fast strategy, kind of to Ariel's point. Have a little agility in your strategy as well, because you're probably going to find some things out about your organization that's going to cause you to maybe shift that as you go through the journey. But for me, as I'm developing it, how do I think about it? I really kind of focus on, because I deal mostly just directly with the manufacturing, the operators on the floor, as an example. I look at it from a task perspective. And so while my industry is food and beverage primarily, right, there are many things in my factories that are basically the same from one factory to the next. So I kind of divide those things up that are the same versus some of the unique aspects of what we do from a task perspective from site to site as we make the different products. So, you know, I typically, for those tasks that are the same, whether it be like safety reporting or, you know, categorizing your unplanned downtime or whatever it is that you're doing on the factory floor in a system, I try and do those in common platforms, because I find that there's a value from an economics perspective or cost perspective when you go to scale those. You don't want to have 15 systems, if you can avoid it. It's very difficult to get to one, I'll be honest, especially if you're in a company that's constantly, acquiring other companies. But really try and centralize all that in, because when you do it at scale, it'll be more economical. Plus, a lot of times you're going to want to run analytics and learn what's going on across your entire business, and trying to bring that into a centralized location makes it a whole lot easier. For those things that are unique in the factories, I often let our factories kind of just roll with them, like let them find the tools, because they're going to know best from a requirements perspective what they need in a tool as they're rolling it out. Now, I'll say that with a caveat. You can't just let a factory go and pick something off the shelf, because there's things that you need to set as basic requirements around that, so that you protect your organization against things like security issues, or ensuring that you have personal information protected and that kind of stuff. But I think in general, a lot of the tools that I've seen that have entered into the mainstream part of the organization were ideas that came from somebody on the factory floor of something that they saw that thought that they would help their business. They used it for a while in a decentralized mode, meaning they was kind of a one-off, and then over time it kind of became well known in the organization that I work in, and then it became more of a mainstream tool. So that's kind of, I don't know if I answered all of your questions, but I kind of look at what the tasks are, ask myself, is that something we're doing across all of our factories? If it is, that's usually more of a centralized approach, and then I give the flexibility to the factories in the uniqueness that they have to find their own tools within the framework that I set for them.
I like that. So tasks is the main driver for your
Yep.
determination of the centralization or decentralization. I am curious if they're communicated that way, if it's just like, these are standardized, you got to follow, and then these are the things that here's just the requirements, you choose to do what you want and how you want to do it.
Yep. And, I think the big key point too is when, you're going to set those things out there, right? Don't be so, closed-minded that it has to be that way. You write a standard and you throw your fist down. Keep your ears open as a leader, because you're going to find that there's great ideas out there that, you're going to want to listen to. And maybe that means you need to adjust your strategy going forward to do things a little differently. I'm often battling internally with myself, around continuity of trying to maintain a constant message versus trying to maintain agility and moving the company forward with new ideas. So it's a balancing approach. I won't say it's easy, but that's my general methodology.
Got one more follow-up for you there. I'm curious if there's been any of the decentralized things where you've had an individual or a facility come up with an idea that you thought was great and then turned it into something that was centralized and standardized across the board.
Oh, absolutely. I think I made a comment around that. They're a great test bed, to be honest, of what works well for a factory. And I'll again, another little secret here. I often find that it's in 3 or 4 factories before I even know it exists sometimes. And those are the, when you got a great user acceptance going on where factories are talking to each other and they're deploying tools on their own. Well, it's not necessarily from a security or a personal protective standpoint a great thing to have going on. When you got that kind of pull for a tool that you're trying to deploy, that's half the battle, right? To the people conversation. If they love the tool and they want the tool so bad that they're disseminating that from one factory to the next, you got a really great tool and you should be looking at it as part of your strategy going forward.
Makes sense. I like it. So Cobus, we'll end with you for this topic. How should a manufacturer decide what's the best architecture for them? Cloud, on-prem, hybrid? How do you decide?
Jeff, that's a great question. And I will highlight a couple of considerations that in our experience is important. Firstly, think of your enterprise size. So for large global enterprises, I would say it's important to look towards your vendors, let's say for an equivalent size, globally trusted vendor, which has sort of composable smart factory solutions that essentially can support you on this journey. Because, Brian was mentioning often global enterprises, they grow by acquisition. So you end up with a ton of factories. Let's say you try to standardize, but you may have a mix of OT systems. The point is you are always somewhere on your journey of, let's say, automation, of cloud migration, of adoption of these IoT and cloud connectivity. So essentially, I think my first point will be partner with globally trusted vendors that can essentially take you from where you are at and take you on a journey to sort of migrate or on this cloud connectivity journey. And what I mean by that is, what you should avoid is try to think you're going to scratch the investments of the past and try to restart from scratch in the cloud. Because I mean, if you look at your stacks of OT systems, would be years of investment in business processes and IT OT infrastructure. So you really want to work with vendors which can say, okay, maybe you're on-prem today, but across your SCADA, store and MESs, we have a path where we can take more and more of that into the cloud while maintaining the logic, the content, the business processes, the investments you've made over time. Because it's not just a moment, it's a journey. And essentially, you want to benefit from the cloud. You want to get there eventually, but without losing your years of investment. I think that is the first point, partner with your peers, so to speak. The second point would be consider the mission, the criticality of systems. You typically, your mission critical, your safety, your closed loop control, your high speed, low latency, critical for operations systems typically remains on premise. Right. And, essentially with less critical or more things that needs to go across the enterprise, global visibility, less operational critical, less time sensitive, those can naturally easily migrate to the cloud. Also, think of your regulatory and security environments. Some industries, some global regions are more or less open to cloud adoption, cloud migration. Also, maybe think of the nature and the sensitivity of your data. For example, it may be, again, some industries, some geographies, you want to work differently with your data. So that will also help you decide, do you rather keep things more on-prem, or is it a hybrid, or can I migrate most to the cloud? Next, I'll think around, again, your enterprise size and maturity. You may be a single plant, small enterprise, maybe greenfields, you're starting new. Hey, you've got a great opportunity to maximize cloud adoption, to start rapidly, minimize on-prem footprint of IT infrastructure, etc. Or you may be a huge, like Brian, global enterprise that has grown through acquisition over years, and it's really a migration journey. And often in that case, the best architectures, there's no one size for all. Some of your operations may be hybrid. You really need cloud plus, and most of the time it's hybrid. You need cloud plus on-prem. Often the critical things remain on-prem, or at least a failover backup version remain on-prem, and the non-critical things can move up. And then lastly, I'll highlight your cloud connectivity bandwidth, right? Essentially, just think about what sort of internet connectivity you have in place for your sites or your assets, wherever they may be. What are the bandwidth, the throughput capabilities? That would determine whether you send all of your data up, which may be massive, or just selected data. So I think those are some considerations I would give. But generally, the answer would be different from industry to industry. There's no one size fits all. And often it's hybrid is the answer. Logically in distributed environments where, let's say, you have a fleet of mobile assets you want to monitor, a globally distributed fleet. Generally, cloud is more suitable. Or you may, in this case, have, highly security sensitive, like on-prem large factory or whatever. Maybe you want to remain more on-prem. So it really depends, but generally hybrid with the considerations that I've mentioned.
Makes sense. Well, that wraps up the three main topics that we have. Now we're going to jump into our audience Q&A, and we've probably got more questions than we have time available. We will try and get to each one. If you have more, feel free to put them in, but we'll kind of start going with some of these in order. So let's start with, how can we persuade and effectively guide senior leaders who prioritize short-term cost savings to invest in digitalization and enhance visibility as a foundation for longer-term benefits? Matt, I want to start with you for this one. I'm going to be curious how, as a vice president digital transformation, people present to you, but then how you even present above you.
Sure. And it kind of got talked about right at the very, very beginning, and kind of the word is trust. And so as we build the trust based off of what we do in the transformation, or building an ROI, or building that quick win, as we move that trust around the organization, it becomes easier to sell. Because at the very beginning, it's a sales pitch. You really have to convince senior leadership to take this journey and take the step. And a lot of times you kind of do it right off the hop. You build your ROI, you build that thing that really, like your first big project. And then you need to broadcast that news and move it up. And then you get a little bit more of a taste, and then you get maybe a little bit bigger of a budget. But the key to it all is trust and say do, right? I say I'm going to do this, so you better do it in order to keep that trust going. I think is a really, really good start to guide the senior leadership down that path. Once they see a little bit, it's almost like, my first sip of coffee was good. Now you drink 5 a day, kind of thing. So that's kind of the momentum that flows along with the transformation.
I think it makes sense. Anyone else want to chime in for this one? Otherwise, we'll go to the next.
Well, I think Ariel had a good point earlier that I'd like to build on. For me, starting small, I think, is really, really important, right? Because you can build that trust and then build perpetual ROI, right? Take a portion of that money that came in through that work that you did that was small, put it back into your next project and grow your ROI exponentially. So I think you could, for me, I do that often. Start with a small project, show your leaders that you can actually return on an investment on a small scale. Maybe you don't go straight to large scale right out of the gate, but grow it. Do some perpetual reinvestment of that money back into the program to make yourself a really great program that's got a lot of benefit, and you're doing that with their trust along the way. So I think there's some great points to both of their comments that can be blended together.
So I'm going to follow up on that one and kind of ask, and this would be for everyone here, but how do you then balance between, if you only have a limited amount of budget to go, do I pick the biggest ROI, but it may cost more upfront, or do I pick one that may not have as high of ROI, but it doesn't cost much to actually do the pilot? I can do it, pretty easily. How do you balance between that? I'll start with you, Brian, and then if anyone else wants to chime in.
Well, I think I think it differs in terms of the size of your business, right? So I work for a very large company that does very well. So we have much larger budgets to work with. I think the answer is going to be different for a smaller company that may not. But typically, I think when you show a leader that you can deliver more money back to the business through an ROI, they're very interested in doing it. Now, whether or not there's enough cash in the system to go do that, that's another question. But I think staying close to them on how well things are really going and what kind of budget you have to work with, and not going so fast that your company can't handle the cash flow on it. But everyone in business is really looking for those large ROIs. So I think that's kind of that's what most leaders are going to tell you that they're really interested in. And so I try and do that. There are some other things that I try and, keep an eye on too. I think the big topic for me these days is, trying to create a great labor environment for my people to work in, right? It's very difficult to find people in the manufacturing space for those that don't work there. Turnover is huge. So, I think we need to think differently about how we attract the workforce and the value behind that. So that's something else that I'm looking at. Can we create a great work environment where people want to come and work for my company, where they're going to stay, longer than 6 months before they decide to move on to their next job, and really trying to create an attractive environment for those people to work in. So that's another element of it that I often look into, without going too sideways on your question. But yeah,
still good stuff to share. This is free form right now.
Yep.
Did anyone else want to comment on that question? Ariel?
Yeah, one thing I was going to add is Rome wasn't built in a day. It started with a stone, a machine. If you're connecting with the OEM solution, let's just say, on average, you're going to spend about maybe $1,000 to $3,500, depending on the type of equipment. That's just on average in my industry, what I've seen. If you're at a small company, just start with one. If you're at a bigger company, start with one department of problematic machines. And if you can't get the funding for a couple $1,000s, that will undoubtedly, if you have focus and the right people on the project, it will pay itself off in weeks, potentially weeks, if you really make it a focused effort with your team. And then you show that value. And then it becomes a lot easier for people to say, yeah, no problem. I'll write this check for you. I know we've got a great team supporting it, and we're going to get a return very quickly. I can almost guarantee if you're at a small company right now, try getting funding to connect one machine, pull in your OpEx person, pull in your engineer, pull in your operator, make sure you have that holy trinity of people, process, technology covered for that one machine. It will undoubtedly pay itself off potentially in weeks.
Makes sense. I like it. Anyone else for that question? Otherwise, we'll get to one more that we'll have.
And to bolt one thing onto that, which is a great statement. Don't pick the machine that runs perfectly.
I think that makes sense.
Yeah, nobody's going to want to see you change, maybe from 96 to 97%. That's awesome. Pick the thing that is the hardest to run. May not be necessarily be the hardest to connect, but something relatively easy to connect to, so you stay inside that $3,500 a machine to connect to, but generate scrap, cause problems for the operator, constantly maybe going into the fence. Who knows what the answer might be, but pick something that plant manager says, that machine keeps me up at night because of this. Then you'll get that win very, very quickly.
I like it. All right, let's do a lightning round, 10 seconds each. I want to know what technological trend you see coming up in the next year enabling IT/OT convergence for a smart factory. Let's just go around real quick, 10 seconds. Matt, I'll start with you because you were just up. What do you see as the biggest trend?
Edge. We're switching to edge computing.
All right. Brian, what do you see?
You got me stumped. Pass. I'll have to come back to me.
Ariel, what are you seeing? Come back to you too?
No, AI, artificial intelligence, ChatGPT, whatever that form of artificial intelligence that you want to use, it saves you tons of time. If you haven't used it yet, go and sign up today.
Awesome. Cobus, you, real quick.
Centralization of data for the purposes of AI ML, basically, but then closing the loop back to control, meaning which will move to edge computing, like Matt said, because AI is great, but if you can't take the action to actually and effectively possibly automate that action, best it can do is give a suggestion or raise alert, which somebody still needs to act on, which is not a good idea. So AI ML in the cloud, followed by edge computing to take automatic actions.
With
good answer. All right, we gotta go right back to Lucian though, because we're right at time. But thank you everyone for showing up and being here today.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you.
Now as we're heading into the cyber aspect, we'd like to take the opportunity to thank the sponsors, also the supporting organizations. So as we're moving from how do you extract value from the manufacturing towards the protecting, how do you do that securely? How do you perhaps protect the code that you're purchasing from the wealth of platforms out there through perhaps an escrow agreement? So that's what the next session is about. So look forward to see you. Thank you, the speakers. Thank you, the attendees. Look forward to see you in the next session.